Here's a really interesting question. Where did the religious right wing in the United States come from? Now, until today, I have to admit, I never really thought about it. I never thought about its roots because I just kind of assumed that there was always, religious right-wing people that were really conservative, that were vocal. And I just assumed that it was an organic thing from the beginning of the country. I mean, the U.S. has never had a shortage of religious people, and they've never had a shortage of conservative people. So I figured they had just existed from the beginning. Well, I'm kind of wrong about that because while they did exist, they weren't always organized or mobilized and really active. But the story behind how they got that way is unreal. Quote, this is from Crooks and Liars. The modern religious right formed practically overnight as a rapid response to the Supreme Court's landmark ruling in Roe v. Wade. Or at least that's how the fake story goes. The reality, according to a guy named Randall Balmer, who's a Dartmouth professor, and he wrote this originally in Politico magazine, he says the religious right, who like to call themselves the moral majority at the time, actually organized around, quote, fighting to protect Christian schools from being desegregated. Whoa, dude. Whoa. I didn't know that. I always knew that, it was the conservatives in the United States that were against giving women equal rights, giving black people equal rights, and they were kind of fighting progress tooth and nail all along. But I didn't know that it was the religious right-wingers specifically that were like, no, we cannot desegregate these schools. That would be madness. That would be anarchy. Black people are inferior to us. Keep them away. So it wasn't Roe versus Wade that, quote, woke up the sleeping dragon of the evangelical vote. It was Green versus Kennedy, a 1970 decision stripping tax-exempt status from segregation academies, which is private Christian schools that were set up in response to Brown versus Board of Education, where the practice of barring black students continued. The entire movement originated from racism. Mind officially blown. We already didn't like these guys, but now we have a reason to dislike them even more. So the next time you hear one of these guys talking about how they're so much more moral than you and they know what's right and they know what's wrong and they follow Jesus, bring up to them the fact that the roots of their entire political movement, all these anti-abortion protesters, all the people who listen to Pat Robertson and John Hagee and, now Matthew Hagee, his son, and Rod Parsley is another one of these guys. Rick Santorum was big in this movement and still is to a large degree. Mike Huckabee, same thing. The roots of their entire political movement, racism. Period, the end. It's uncomfortable, it's blunt, it's rigid, but it's straightforward and it's true. Okay? The whole movement was about we cannot desegregate. And then they also go on to give details in the article about how there was a savvy politician who came along that realized that, hey, can't really play the long game on just hatred. Can't really play the long game on just racism and being against desegregation. So what should we do here? Well, we should try to incorporate in another political issue that might mobilize people better. And that's when they incorporated abortion, and then that became their big thing later on. But originally, the roots, all racism.